My name is Scott Bolden. I'm the community lead and product evangelist here at Productboard. And thanks again for joining us, everybody, today for our event. A few housekeeping items just to get us started. We will be recording today's session and we'll make it available on the community afterwards, usually up there within a day or two. You can look for that under our recap topic, and it's now available within our past events section up in the top heading bar. Q&A will be used for questions today, chat for chat. If you have any comments or things like that through the session, feel free to leave them inside there. Just a quick reminder as well to make sure you select to everyone versus to hosts and panelists. Otherwise, you're just going to be talking to Ian and I today, and no one else will be seeing much on that side. So really happy to have Ian Ames join us today. He's going to be talking about product prioritization as a triage. I first met Ian in another community, Product in the Ether, which is run by Randy Silver, who a lot of people maybe know from the minor product space. But Ian is a contract delivery manager, currently working with the NHS 111 online service. This is a triage tool used to help non-urgent patients be directed to the right healthcare for their needs. He's worked in the digital and IT space for over 20 years, much like me, has been around the block a little bit, which is great to see. And has worked with lots of different multidisciplinary teams to deliver services in a really user-centered kind of fashion. And I think Ian's going to have a wonderful session for us today on this topic and sharing some of his past experiences and work in mountain rescue as well. So Ian, I'm going to pass that over to you to share screen and get yourself going.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everybody. Scott said I'm Ian. Let's see if I can share screen. So yeah, I'm going to be using Slido today. So if you want to jump on in advance, thought we can make it a little bit more interactive, get some of your thoughts and experiences as we move forward. Nothing too challenging, don't worry. Just a few questions as we go. But if you use hashtag product triage to join, that would be cool. So you might be wondering, who's this guy? Who's this person? So yeah, as Scott said, I'm currently a delivery manager, and I struggle with titles a little bit. I've been called a delivery manager, scrum master, agile coach, technical team lead. All of these job titles that never really align with what you do as a person. So I've given up on titles, and I just like to describe myself as a person that helps multidisciplinary teams deliver software in a user-centered way. So that's teams that involve developers, testers, user researchers, designers, business analysts, product owners, getting them all to gel and work together to deliver great products. I've worked mostly in the government space. So as Scott said earlier, the best thing about graduating the year 2000 is really easy to work out how long I've been working, how long my career is. So 22 years now, working in IT and digital space. Worked for a number of government areas, some of them listed up there. So currently working with NHS Digital. So yeah, first question, where is everybody else from? Give us a sense on there. It should come up straight away if you want to add your location. New Hampshire, nice. Vancouver, Manchester, UK, Las Vegas. Foggy Cornwall. Excellent. Devon, excellent. A few locals. Prague, excellent. Stockholm. A real mix. Okay, we'll move on from there. I'm not sure how you managed to make Vancouver so big. Was that because there's more people from Vancouver, maybe? But that's really cool. So I'm lucky enough to live in Plymouth in the UK. We're nestled between Devon and Cornwall. Not quite Devon, not quite Cornwall. But it's a really fantastic place to live. So if you don't know the UK too well, as you can see, Plymouth's down here in the sticky outy bit into the Atlantic. Most of the product jobs exist in London, so it's a fair old trek. As you can see, the distance from Paris to London is about the same as Plymouth to London. So you might be questioning, why would you live down there? Well, it's a great place to live. Quality of life. We've got some of the best whitewater rivers in the country. We've got standard rivers as well. This is me and the kids and my wife on the paddleboard, just out on the River Tamar. So kayak is great. It's amazing surfing. Lots of surfing around on both the north and south coast. Cornwall's the only county in the UK that's only got one land border, so lots and lots of beaches, lots of surfing, obviously a lot of sailing. Devon's got the biggest, largest amount of lanes in the country, so there's loads of opportunities for cycling. This is our big rig, me and the kids, we go out on. We've got 3 lots of moorland, Exmoor, Dartmoor, Bodmin Moor, so there's loads of walking opportunities. And Dartmoor's the only place in England where you can wild camp legally, so it's great for just going out and taking the bike out for the weekend and getting very, very cold, sleeping in a tent. So you're probably sitting here going, I thought I came to a product management talk. Why is he talking about all these the fun places he's got to live? Well, it wouldn't be a product talk without some strong opinions. So in my opinion, successful products are always built by teams with a strong learning culture. And to me, hustle culture limits your learning. Finding ways to work, expand your horizons beyond just doing the hustle of day-to-day product stuff gives you better opportunities for learning different approaches and different techniques that you can bring back to your role. So I'm a massive advocate of going out, volunteering, taking those skills from other sectors and other areas and bringing them back to teams. To give you some examples of that, so before I moved into product management and IT and digital, I learned how to drive enormous container ships, so pilot container ships. Of course, this is Ever Given, everybody's favorite container ship. And even now, 22 years later, I still come back on a lot of the skills I learned about communication, planning, passage planning, iterating those plans when you're about to collide with something. All of those same skills apply day to day. Similarly, I've volunteered at a code club. So code clubs are for 8 to 11-year-olds to learn coding skills. If you're a person that's responsible for getting a team to move and gel in one direction, you certainly learn those skills trying to get a bunch of kids to work on coding projects when they've perhaps not done that before. It's a lot of fun. Oh, that's very blurry. I've also one of the directors on Plymouth's largest New Year's Day sea swim. So every year we go down to our local beach and hundreds of people join us to dive in the sea in the freezing cold conditions. Again, it's a lot of fun and learn a lot of skills, business skills around running a charity to do that. And what I want to talk to today is volunteering I used to do with the mountain rescue about 10 years ago before the kids were born. It's probably worth me clarifying what I mean by mountain, especially for all of you joining from other countries. So most people, when they think of mountains, you know, nice snowy peaked ridges. This is Mount Everest, of course. It's a little bit different in the UK. So this is High Willowes. This is the highest mountain on Dartmoor. It's 621 meters. The official height limit, the lowest limit for a mountain is 600 meters. So we technically got 2 mountains on Dartmoor. Nevertheless, there is very tricky terrain on the moors. We have a lot of gorges, we have a lot of cleaves, steep-sided valleys, river valleys flowing off the moors. A lot of areas where it's necessary to do rope work. Very tricky, challenging terrain and bogs, good old bouncy bogs where you could fall in. All of this area behind us here is waterlogged. You probably can't tell it there, but getting across that is a real challenge. And rivers, you know, lots of fast-flowing whitewater rivers that we need to fish people out of when they get stuck, normally chasing their dogs. So one of the processes we use as a mountain rescue team is, especially when we come across multiple casualties, is triage. So what is triage? It's a medical term. It was invented in the Napoleonic Wars when clinicians on the battlefield found that they had far more people to treat than the capacity to treat them. So it's the language used there is it's a practice invoked when acute care cannot be provided for lack of resources. And that might sound familiar. Quite often as a product leader, you're asked to do a number of things where you won't have the resources to do them all. So the idea of triage is to ration the care towards those who are most in need of immediate care, who benefit from it the most. Most generally, it refers to prioritization of medical care as a whole. So I've been thinking about triage a lot recently, but currently working with the NHS 111 online team. So this is an online tool that helps members of the public in the UK access the clinical care that is most appropriate for their needs. So unlike a lot of the world in the UK, medical help is free on the point of use, but that means we need to sort of think about how do we get people to the most appropriate care, not necessarily the best care. So this is a tool that enables you to go on, enter your symptoms, enter what you think might be wrong with you, and using that tool and the available services in your area, it recommends where to go to next to get treatment. So it's a fairly complex tool. It's got a lot of, it uses a system called Pathways, which asks a lot of questions to get you to the right level of care. Again, you're probably thinking, well, what's this got to do with product management? Hopefully you're starting to see the links a little bit more. Well, here's a question for you. Who started in product roles and thought, this is great, I'm going to make an excellent product, I'm going to work with fantastic teams, it's going to be so fun. And before you know it, you're drowning in requests. You've got hundreds of stakeholders asking you different things. You've got user research coming back and data analytics is telling you different things. You've got conflicting opinions and you don't know which way to jump. Let's find out. How many of you felt like you're drowning in product management roles? Are you Michael Phelps or are you drowning? Are you glub, glub? No, Michael Phelps is. Cool. So that's reassuring. Hopefully I can help a little bit. So yeah, a simple triage process can help to determine what's, where to go next, what problem to solve first. There's always more problems than the resources to deal with it. So that process for me is it's about assessing the landscape, have a simple prioritization process, the key there being simple, work out how best to work with the people you've got and the skills you've got, and most importantly, reflect and adapt and practice. So I'll go for each of those in a bit more detail. So number one, assessing the landscape. So this is Tavy Cleave on Dartmoor, and quite often we get a call out and say, Walker's gone missing, we're in the Tavy Cleave area, don't know where they are. Where do you start? We've got all, there's miles and miles of different terrain here. You can see it's very, very difficult to spot a person in this little rock here. It's probably about the size of a person. So being able to spot that person in that space, it's really hard. Knowing where to start. Do we head north? Do we head south? Do we head east, west? What do we do? So the first thing we'll do is we'll send out dog teams and hasty teams. So these are fast response people. They travel really, really light. They cover the easiest ground there is and sweep the area really, really quickly, just to try and get a sense of where that person might be. They're not probing in detail. They're not looking in under every nook and cranny. They're just going out to get a picture of where the person could be, or any evidence of that person is there. So a lot like probes in product teams, you're setting out little investigatory patterns to try and understand the landscape a little bit better and where best to allocate your resources. So we're looking at the map again, right? We've got our probes out. We need to think ahead. If this person is down here in the Cleave, then it may be necessary for us to deploy a rope team, a fast river kit team, the skills to get in the cold and the equipment to get in cold rivers and get the patient out. Do we have those skills? Do we have those skills and that equipment available? How long will it take us to deploy down there if it does turn out the person is there? Similarly, they could be missing off the backside of the tor here. So around the back of this tor, there's quite steep cliffs. It could be necessary, especially if they've injured their legs or they've fallen from a cliff. Perhaps they've got a neck injury, a spinal injury. It's probably going to be necessary for us to deploy a ropes team, a number of staff to get a number of staff members, team members. Why would we call them staff? Team members to go out and move that patient very, very gently to ensure we don't give them a spinal injury. So we need to have those resources ready on hand, ready to go to respond to what the hasty pro teams find for us. We need to make sure we're skilled and ready to use those teams. We know what they're doing. Lost my flow. Finally, as you can probably see, there's not a lot in the way of access points here. So once we do find a casualty, once we stabilize them, how are we going to get them off? Do we need to get a Land Rover in? Have we got easy access from a lane perspective? Can we walk them off if they're not too injured? Or worst case, whoops, do we need to chopper them out? Is a chopper available? Is it the right conditions for the chopper to fly? So there's all of these decisions happening all the time. We need to anticipate a lot of things about likely scenarios that happen for that patient. We need to understand quickly where that patient's headed, where the casualty is, and deploy the right resources to help retrieve them from the moor and get them to hospital or to safety. So in product management terms, this is discovery land, right? This is the same stuff we do when we're right at the beginning of a project. Lots of unknowns. We don't necessarily know the direction we need to jump in. We've got a sense of what's trying to be achieved, but there's always a lot of unknowns in this space. So really, what we're doing as a mounted rescue team, and what we do as product teams is understanding the problem we need to solve in detail. Understand what's the risks and constraints. Where are the places that are going to put us under the most strain? Do we have the skills and capabilities and equipment to rescue a casualty from a river, for example? Similarly, do we have the skills, capabilities, money available as a product team to solve the problems that our customers are experiencing? Finally, is this worth pursuing? This is quite a hard one as a mounted rescue team, but we should be taking the last thing you want to do is put your team in danger to rescue a person, and you have to make that hard decision of, if you haven't got the skills and haven't got the capabilities, what do we do in that scenario? Same with products. It's okay to say we've learned enough in discovery that this is not worth pursuing anymore. I wish more teams did that, frankly, because quite often that is the case. So in the UK government space, we use a process called Discovery, Alpha, Beta, and Live to sort of step through that. And the circles try and sort of represent an iteration of how it flows, but it still looks very waterfally. It's a very phased approach. Discovery, Alpha, Beta, Live feels very waterfally. In my experience, it's very different to that. You end up with doing different discoveries depending on the problem you're solving at a given time. So you may at the beginning of the project not know anything, but after an initial discovery period, it's good to start solving some initial problems, getting that in front of customers, and then doing that discovery loop over and over and over again. So discovery becomes much more iterative, much smaller towards delivering a live service. So I want to give you a quick example of that. So current project we're working on, we're looking at how do we provide information to clinicians about a patient as they flow through the urgent and emergency care system in the UK. It's provided by lots and lots of different providers, lots of different care settings to do that, and all of the information very disparate and all over the place. Right at the beginning of the project, we had a number of stakeholders with slightly different goals, slightly different opinions on what this project was for. So we spent a lot of time with them to reframe all of these, what they were hoping to achieve, into hypotheses. So you think this is true, how do we validate that that's true? How do we validate that this is the right problem to solve? These were our probes, these were our hasty teams going out, trying to solve and understand that the assertions that our stakeholders are making were actually true. We time box that period, and the reason we time box is you don't want to get into analysis paralysis in this space. You want it to be quick. You want it to be you're not going to get all the answers straight away in a quick discovery, but you need enough to be able to move forward. And we wanted to define the hypothesis. You had to have some measures to which to say whether you met it or not, and that was a combination of. This is probably the hardest part, to be honest. That was a combination of quantitative and qualitative analysis, but defining what what's enough evidence that we're confident that this is true and is confident enough to move forwards is always the hardest part. And we had to iterate that a few times as we went through that process. Importantly, it wasn't just about the stakeholders on this project. We've spent a lot of time talking to clinicians that would use the product, get their feedback, and also the patients that are on the receiving end of the care, to make sure that their needs are being taken into account as we build the service. Interestingly, a lot of the assumptions we'd made around patients and patient consent of care information turned out not to be true. We suspected lots of people would be concerned about their information being shared. That wasn't true at all. The notion that if the information is being used to my benefit, for my care, I'm more than happy for that to be shared. Importantly, during this process, we had to bring our stakeholders with us. The picture on the right is the first slide we did in our first ever show and tell, and it was a little GIF, this little guy going up and down on his little roller coaster, just captured with, it's okay to feel like this. It's important that people are brought on the journey with you and are made to feel that uncertain, get familiar with uncertainty. Feel, we don't know all the answers. We never know all the answers in discovery, and that's okay. Making sure that by feeding that back regularly and doing really short periods of feedback, like on a weekly basis, we were doing show and tells. It gave our stakeholders the opportunity to ask questions and feel uncomfortable. So we were bringing them on the journey with us. And what we found as a result of that is the solutions we were proposing by the end of the discovery were completely different to what some of the solutions that we were being presented with as project goals were. So we ended up with a very, very different set of objectives to what was a very solution-based direction at the beginning of the project. So you've done your discovery, you've got a sense of the problem you're trying to solve. You're doing that on a small iterative base, almost a discovery per feature level of change. How do you decide which feature to do next? For me, it's all about a simple prioritization process, and this is the bit that really saves you from drowning. So as I said earlier, in NHS 111 Online, because it's clinical, it's a really complex process. The pathway system that supports 111 Online asks a number of questions and comes to a lot of different scenarios depending on the answer to those questions. Don't build that. It doesn't need to be that complex. In mounted rescue teams, we're not clinicians. We're trained in casualty care, but we're not qualified doctors or nurses. So we need a much simpler process. So if we come across a patient, the first thing we do to assess their priority is to use the delightfully acronymed AVPOO scale. And basically, we're using this to determine, do I treat this patient or do I move on to the next person? So the process is the person alert? Are they talking to me? Even if they're screaming in pain, at least they're alert and they're responsive. They're probably going to be okay. The next one is response to voice. So they may not be alert, they may not be answering your sentences, but they're at least able to nod or acknowledge that, questions that you're asking, like, are you awake? What's your name? Where do you live? You're getting some sort of response to a voice-based question. The next one is response to pain. So if the person appears unresponsive, if you pinch them, do they respond to that sort of, jerk or move away from the pain? And finally, unresponsive. They're our highest priority. These are the people that, they're not responding to stimuli. We need to start looking, feeling for pulses, making sure that they're breathing, and treating them toot sweet. So using a similar scale for your features can help. So this is just an example scale put together that we could use, and it needs to be simple. So first thing to ask is maybe the impact of the change you're making. So in our scenario, does it improve clinical safety? Does it improve outcomes for a large number of users? Does it have a significant improvement for a small number of users? Does it improve the NHS's reputation? Does it save money? Does it reduce technical complexity? Or is it going to be fun to do? For each of those, if you answer one, add them all together. You may want to factor in difficulty. It depends. You may have other means of factoring in unknownness, but you could do something similar. So problems vague or not well researched. If you need sign off from other areas, policy, information governance, pathways changes in this scenario, different teams, or if you've never done this before, there's going to be a level of unknown, as I said. Again, mark that with a 1. Take one away from the other, you've got a priority. So that's just one example. You need to come up with your own list for your particular setting. That's a very clinically based, not clinical, but it's very aimed at NHS 111. You'll have different motivations in your company. So do that as a team. Come up with as a product manager, what are the criteria by which I assess each type of change, and what would I count each, what would be the thing that makes me lift this ticket over this ticket in my head as the next thing to do. And the reason why that's really important to do is eventually when you get to a good list that makes sense and you validate it works, well, anybody in the team can do that. If somebody's receiving a request into the team, they could just quickly go through that scenario. You can get your customers to do that. You can get your stakeholders to do it for you. It takes some of that load you get of dealing with all of this noise coming from different stakeholder groups and user groups, and give it, empower them a little bit to provide the answers on the importance. Importantly, the decision making is really clear. Everything's being assessed under the same criteria, so you can see why something's been assessed as higher than the other, and it doesn't get into this hippo kind of scenario where the highest paid person stuff may end up being prioritized over something else. And it's objective. Everybody's seeing that, it's being assessed under the same criteria. There's some stuff to be wary of when you do this. The first time I did this, I ended up producing a priority matrix, super complex. It had like 1 million if statements in it. Before you know it was unworkable, especially when you wanted to change it. The decision-making process behind it was really esoteric. The team couldn't see how it got to the conclusions that it did. So it needs to be super simple. Think back to the AVCU scenario, something as simple as that. And importantly, it allows you to change it. So as you're starting to build this thing and as you start to filter change through it, you can change it really easily, the simpler it is. The important thing as well is to make it relevant to your context. Everybody's work scenarios are different. Everybody's got different motivators, your products have different motivators that you need, as product owners, have the experience and skills and know what are the factors that make me prioritize one thing over the other. It's important not just to lift it from another scenario. You need to define your own context. And importantly, practice it. It's not going to be right first time. Practice it, run through a couple of scenarios, do it in your planning sessions with the team, get feedback from the team about, okay, well, why has this come out with this result? Does that feel right? Does that make sense? And it's okay to override it as well. Sometimes just getting on and doing the hippo stuff, you can't get away from that. But you could actively acknowledge that you've chosen to do that rather than just having to do it without any real context. So a bit of a case study of where I've used this. You've probably all seen this before. This is kind of like the classic Venn diagram of where product management sits. So you've got UX, tech, and business, and the product manager sits in the middle, as Martin Erickson's described it before. I usually find this is more of the reality. You have a lot of different people in each of those groups, all shouting at you with their little megaphones, all shouting at members of the team, asking for different things, slightly different motivations. You've got the poor old users sat on the outside, normally not getting a word in edgeways, whilst the noise of the company is going on. And we certainly found this as a team in my previous organization. So we were getting flooded with requests for different parts of the business, and having a really hard time saying no to people and prioritizing one thing over the other. So we did this, we produced the priority list and we published it nice and early to get feedback from the stakeholders to say, look, we need to think about how we prioritize one thing over the other. We've got a limited amount of, we're only one team. We haven't got a limited budget. How do we pick one thing over the next? We're being really open and honest. This is our process. We published that early, got feedback from stakeholders. And it allowed us to move on from hippo opinions. It allowed us to move on and say, even with stakeholders, say they could see the objectivity of it. They could see, okay, the case I'm making for this, I need to be stronger on why this is important, because at the moment I'm not scoring high, or even sometimes, I see the point you're making, but we need, it revealed more questions. We need to do this because, great, okay, we didn't know that before. Let's factor that into the decision. So yeah, it led to the requester having to think, well, not necessarily think deeper, but feed back more clearly as to why this is important. The request became better defined. Importantly, it made planning a little bit quicker. We didn't have to spend time understanding the relative priorities of things because the assessment had already been done. As we took it in, we were able to see, okay, look, we can see this is a high priority. How do we move on from the should we conversation to the how do we do this conversation? Planning became much more about that. But importantly, we acknowledged it's a model, and all models are wrong, but some are useful. It's sometimes you could step outside that model and just JFDI, work around it. But for 99% of the cases, it really helped us factor out what's relevant and what's important. Okay, so you understand your landscape, you understand where you're going, what problems you're trying to solve. You've acknowledged that they're worth doing. You've got a team, you've got a product list. The next bit is to work out how are we going to work, how are we going to solve these problems in front of us. And one thing I learned from Mounted Rescue is there's a difference between one of the things I don't think we ask enough as product teams is how many people does this large scale feature, high priority thing need everybody to solve the problem, or can we solve some of these other things in parallel? So that's a really important question in triage. If you come across a patient who's got a neck injury, for example, it's probably going to take the whole team to rescue that person. You need to move them really, really carefully. It takes 6 or 7 people to get them onto a stretcher, and then you've got to ship them off. It's taking up a lot of, that's pretty much a whole team there just for one person. If you've got other casualties in that scenario, you need to pick one over the other. And I think sometimes as product teams, we don't ask that question enough. Another scenario in Mounted Rescue is if you come across somebody that's hypothermic and they require CPR, if you can't guarantee that CPR continues until you get to hospital, you run the risk of they run the risk of death if you start CPR. And you stop before they get to hospital. The risk of death is much higher if you can't continue. So you need to ask those questions. If I start this process now, can I make sure it gets to done? Can I make sure I get to safety and get to the good, get to the hospital and good care? So as teams, we should be asking, do we need the whole team to solve this problem? If not, who do we need? And do we have the skills and capabilities? Is this likely to change as we learn more? So, okay, this patient's, got a neck injury, but actually once a paramedic arrives, maybe they can work out that there's not, and we can dedeploy, or actually as we start to look at the patient, it could become worse. So we need to factor that in. And importantly, if we start treating other patients in parallel, is there anything, can we finish that treatment in time to ensure that we can jump onto the main priority should that condition deteriorate? Are those other patients safe to leave, safe to put to one side if we find that we need the whole team to jump onto that problem, onto the casualty with the higher needs? So I've experienced this again with the previous team. We built a search function in our service. So we would allowing users to search by postcode to find property information. And the information we held, this is when I was at the land registry, and the land registry registers land, not property. It's just that some property is on land. So most people's mental model when they come to the service is about addresses and postcodes. We hold information about fields and boundaries and stuff like that. So the results didn't match their mental model always. So we had a challenge there with our search function within our service. We also had the challenges around performance. It wasn't particularly performant. We needed to improve the way the API worked and refactor that. So we had this combination of technical and service design problems within our service. The bigger problem was the service design scenario. It just wasn't making sense to people. The responsiveness was less of a concern at that time. So as a result, that meant solving the service design issue was going to take longer because we had to sort of step it through prototyping and user research to get feedback before we got into the design and build phase. So as a team, we went, okay, well, let's slot in the service design stuff. And in the meantime, we'll get the devs to work on fixing the API and making that more performant. Seems like a perfectly sensible approach. What the result was, though, is that the devs work took longer than we expected. And as a result, the service design improvements ended up queued behind the dev work. We weren't solving our primary goal quicker because we'd chosen to work in things in parallel and we couldn't bypass one over the other. So we ended up having, delaying our primary objective because we'd chosen to do things in parallel. So after that, we started to factor in the sort of droppability question. If we pick this up, if we pick up this second priority work ticket, can we drop it again if the higher priority piece of work needs more people to jump on it, or we've got a level of uncertainty in how we deliver it? Is it safe to leave? Was a key question we started to factor into planning after that scenario. I recommend, is it safe to leave, as a question for lower priority stuff. Last one. So one of the key things with mountain rescue teams is we go out every Wednesday and practice this stuff. The last thing you want with a team is to come across a real casualty and not know how to deal with them, or panic. These are hard scenarios. It's quite hard to deal with a person say, I'm sorry, you're not a priority, when they are screaming in your face in pain. And practicing for that is really, really important. But also reflecting on that and finding the time and the space to consume that practice. As a team, we used to go to the pub after the event, sit down, talk it through, have a chat, just a friendly chat about what's gone well, what's not. I'm not recommending the pub's the best scenario for all teams, but it can be. But finding space to reflect on how things have gone, finding space to learn is so beneficial to teams. Finding time and space to do that can be really, really hard in product teams. There's pressure to deliver. So you need to think about how do you build that into the sort of day-to-day routine. Classic example is retrospectives. They're the best, really good, effective retrospectives. It gives people the space to kind of go, this could have been better, and this is why, or didn't that go really, really well? How can we do that? How can we make sure we do that more often? Another scenario I like to use is the anti-problem workshop, to giving people the space to think, like, if you were given this problem, what would be the worst possible way you would solve it? And flipping that mindset to how would we do this in the worst possible way helps people think, well, what's the reverse of that? How do we solve this in the most effective way? It's really interesting how thinking about things in the negative can bring out the positives sometimes. Really important to celebrate success. I can't say that enough. So taking the time out after a release to go and celebrate, get together, especially in the remote world when we're all together, finding ways to celebrate success is a little bit more challenging. But even just sending cakes to your team to say, well done, whatever, it's just a nice thing. And if you are working on that kind of release cycle, factoring in time to just allow people to learn. So maybe at the end, after a big functional release of something, even if you've been releasing the small chunks as you go, if you've delivered a big feature, give the team a week to go and learn. Okay, during this process, we made this bit. It's not as good as it could be. wouldn't it be great if we could spend a week learning a bit more about that and making it better? Giving people the space to do that is only going to make your product better in the end. So factoring that in is really important. So one example of that with my old team again was with retros. So we're starting to get to the point with retros where, and they can get stale sometimes. It's really important, people in my kind of role to make sure they're staying relevant, pertinent. And what I found with the retros is they were less about the issues that were occurring in the sprint and more about the issues that were just relevant on that day. People were bringing the things that were on their mind on that particular day, not the most important things that happened during the whole sprint. So we set up a continuous retro channel in Slack. And the idea of that was just as things were occurring and things were getting on people's nerves or as things were going well, post it in the channel. So they were able to post anytime they like and flag whether it needs solving right now or can it wait for the retro. This is something I want to talk about in the retro, or actually, do you know what? It's on fire now. I need some help. Come and help me. So this has benefited us two ways. We're solving problems a lot quicker, highlighting them to each other a lot quicker, and it also meant our retros were much more focused on all of the issues that had occurred during the sprint and not just the ones that were on people's minds as they went into the retrospective session. Yeah, I'd recommend it. Yeah, set yourself up a continuous retro channel. They really helped us. So in summary, assess the landscape, understand the problem you're solving, understand who this is for. How do we is this problem the right problem to solve? Do we understand what the outcomes are going to be? Do we have the skills to do it? Is this worth doing? Set yourself up a simple prioritization process. Key bit there is simple. Make it so that the whole team can do it. It will save you a ton of time. Work out with the team how best to work. And what I mean by that is make sure if you're picking up more features than just the highest priority one, that if something should change with that high priority feature, you've got the flexibility to drop other stuff and get more people to focus on it. And practice, inspect and adapt. Keep practicing, keep reflecting, keep adapting. And my final thought is the point I made at the beginning. All of this I learned from Mountain Rescue. I didn't, I've seen the overlaps with product management. So I definitely, for me, volunteering is a great way to expand your learning, expand your experiences, and take in experiences and skills from other areas to make you a better PM. So final question. I'm interested in, if people had similar experiences of volunteering or other activities that taught you about being a better product manager. If you have, maybe just list them there and see if anybody's got any equivalent experiences. Ultra running, cool. Any others? What's ultra running? I'm not even too sure I know what that is, to be honest. Firefighting, yeah, I bet similar experiences, I'm sure. Yeah, knowing who to deal with on a day-to-day. Well, what I will say is if you haven't got those experiences, if you can find the time, carve out the time to volunteer, you'll find it will definitely help. Teaching, yeah, I bet. I definitely found that from Code Club. If you can teach a small group of kids to try and achieve a small project on Code Club and work together on something, then running product teams after that is easy. I'll leave it there. Thanks, everybody. Just want to say, if you want to contact me, that's my handle on Twitter @IanAmes. It's my blog, and also the Mountain Rescue is a voluntary organisation. If you do go out walking, if you do use the hillside in the UK, I've left a link there if you'd like to donate. You don't have to, obviously, but it's always nice to help support the team. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you taking the time. We're going to open it up for some Q&A. If anybody has some questions they'd like to ask Ian, either about his presentation or about the topics that he talked about today, feel free to pop those in the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you. as part of this. I'm going to kick things off, though, maybe with a question on my side. You talked a little bit about the whole team aspect of this. And in particular, maybe something that kind of stood out for me there was we often seem to catch a lot of these, I guess, directional mistakes, obviously in a retrospective. But how do we get better maybe as product teams in picking up on those signals before we get to that challenge and then end up in a retrospective, looking back at it going, we should have did that better? What are some of the tricks maybe that you brought into that help sort of maybe elevate those moments and get the team talking about them earlier?
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty part of that matrix that sort of showed earlier for me, is the sort of factoring that into your priority. So knowing that, knownness is a really big one for me. I really like, if you come across Liz Keogh's blog posts on Kinefin, she's got some really good stuff on there, like, really good frameworks. Sort of says, this is a thing we've all done before. This is easy. Everybody knows how to do it. This is something that the team knows how to do, or we've got the skills within the team to do. This is something that other teams have done that we haven't, or this is something that nobody has ever done ever. And that's a really good framework for knowing the sort of unknownness of, and therefore the likelihood of your estimates to be correct or not really, really helps. Factoring in, questions around dependencies. So are we dependent on governance? Are we dependent on other teams? Really, really helps. So for me, sort of playing off the business decisions of whether something's worth doing, like the impact of this change versus the deliverability of that change, helps to sort of factor those two things in. I find that's useful.
Okay, cool. We got one question here from Mike Fosker. Any guidance on striking the right balance between short-term and urgent versus long-term and important?
Yeah, that's always a good one. When you get into that space of so the blog post of the Discovery Alpha Live bit, I put the link in the thing. There's a really good blog post about how your team changes after things in front of real users. I think there's always a risk of firefighting when you get into that scenario, and I really like Kanban in that scenario compared to Scrum, because it gives you that ability to change those priorities much more quickly. So, if a really urgent thing comes in and you've assessed it as urgent, and it can move to the top of the queue, it doesn't have to wait for the end of sprint planning. It becomes the top of the queue. But we're not going to pick it up until we know all the other stuff that's in flight is done. That's our constraint, if you like. We're not going to touch this until all these other things, the path is clear for us to get it through as quickly as possible. So I find that really, really helps when you're in that scenario of dealing with live type issues as well. It doesn't help as great. It's not as great for the long-term product direction side of things. So I'm not sure I've got a great answer for it, to be honest, Mike. I think you kind of have to play it by ear a little bit. I think factoring in, regular sort of monthly or quarterly roadmap sessions of going, what are the things that are preventing us from moving forward with our roadmap? We're getting constantly hammered with incident type requests. Then why is that? There's obviously something wrong with how our service, the quality of our service somewhere. We need to get that on the roadmap. Fixing that is our highest priority now. That's got to be higher than I can't deliver any new features until I stop this wall of noise coming in. And playing that back to stakeholders can be super helpful sometimes. You'll get all the difficult conversations like, well, why wasn't it good enough the first time? And all that stuff that's difficult to deal with. But there's no getting away from it. If you're getting hammered with incidents, need to sort of stem that flow in order to get back to delivering features.
Yeah, that's a good point. Really good point. I think that sort of urgent, important quadrant still is the most important one, though, to get out of the way, because you got to eliminate that noise to be able to pay attention to the other stuff, as you said, that is still important to go and do. So great place to start on that side. I know that sort of Eisenhower matrix is the classic way a lot of people look at that on a classic 2x2, but that's a good perspective, I think, in terms of how to tackle those problems.
That's another really, it's another great example of a simple process. I definitely recommend with whatever kind of framework you use for making those priorities, just keep it really simple. Simple matrix of one against the other. Don't make it complicated, or just it throws everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we're done for questions today. I'm going to pass over just to wrap up a few things, and we'll let people go on this side. Thank you again, Ian, for the time and energy today. It was great to have your talk, and really appreciated the session. To wrap things up, please take our post-event survey. We'll send that out to you via email. We'd love to get your feedback on this session. I know Ian as well would love to hear your thoughts and things like that on the talk today. You could also win our nice little prize as part of that too that we do. Can also continue the discussion, share a post, add any comments within our product makers community as well. We'd love to hear any commentary on this or any feedback that you have. We've got some great events coming up next week. We're Matt Atkins on building hardware in a software world. Laura and Dina from our product team will be speaking on May the 5th on prioritizing what to build. She's done a great bounty of research on how different organizations are tackling the challenge of product prioritization. It'll be really interesting insights into some of that work that she's done on that side. And we also got Michelle Hansen coming back on May 12th, talking about troubleshooting user interviews from all the little challenges and problems that go along in that discovery part that Ian talked about today. Michelle has some great advice from her book, Deploy Empathy, and some of the work that she's done on that side. Lots of other ways to get involved in our community too, whether that's joining our monthly roundtables, participating in our Meet a Maker program, like connecting with people one-on-one for some of those 30-minute meetings. Great chance to talk about your craft and the work that you do as a product person. And also lots of opportunities to get involved here as a speaker, much like Ian did today. If we encourage you to reach out, let us know if you're interested. We'd love to have some new voices and different voices, particularly those that are more maybe underrepresented, signing up and getting a chance to kind of tell their story and share some of their experiences on that side. So with that, thank you everybody for joining us. Again, please fill out our post-event survey, and we will see you at our next event. Thanks again for coming out, and thanks again, Ian, for the time today.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, no problem. No problem. Take care.